What's up? I'm Waldo. I'm a photographer here in Los Angeles, California. Most of you might know me better by my alias, MoodyDarkRoom. And in today's video, I'm partnering with Viltrox and showing you guys my best tips that I utilize when taking portrait photos. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into it. For today's video, all the examples I'm going to be showing you guys were taken with the brand new Viltrox 56mm F1.2 Pro lens. So this is the setup that I'm using today. And I have the 56mm F1.2 Pro lens paired with my FX30. And this is going to be what I use for this entire video. Viltrox did send me this lens ahead of time so I could play around with it and to make this video along with other content. And I've been using Viltrox lenses for like the last year now, and I've loved every single one of them. So when they sent me this one, I was excited to play around with it and to be able to share some of my tips with you guys. So for all of these tips are going to be a little bit more tailored to this focal length, which is a 56mm, but on a crop sensor. You got to times that by whatever system you're using. I'm using Sony, so that's 1.5 times. So this 56mm 1.2 is actually more of like an 85mm full frame equivalent. So keep that in mind when I'm talking about all these tips. They're a little bit more tailored towards this lens specifically, and more so for portraits specifically as well. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into tip number one. My first tip on how to take better portrait photos when you're using a tighter focal length like this lens is making sure you're bringing all of your lights closer to your subject, because it's going to do two things. First thing is you're not going to need as bright of lights in order to illuminate your subject. For example, if you have a subject and you're shooting them on a wide focal length, you're going to need to hide your lights out of frame, which means moving them away from your subject. This is going to require brighter lights. It's going to require specific light modifiers so you don't have light bleed everywhere. And it's just going to have to add a bunch of things that you might not necessarily have if you're just starting out. But if you're shooting on something like the 56mm 1.2 that has that 85mm full frame equivalent, it's going to be a lot tighter of a crop, which means you can get away with bringing all of your light stands closer to your subject and still having them be out of frame, because you're really only seeing a little bit of their head and then a few feet outside. And then everything outside of that little zone is completely out of frame, which means you don't have to worry about either A, editing it out, or B, actually physically removing it out of the frame so it's not in the frame. This is going to make shooting in a smaller space a lot easier. And it's also going to give you the second benefit, which is giving you softer light without needing any diffusion or softboxes. Let me explain why. If the further a light is away from a subject, the sharper the shadows are going to be, and vice versa. The closer a light is to the subject, the softer the shadows are going to be. And if you're shooting on a tighter focal length, like the 56mm 1.2 on a crop sensor body, then you're going to be able to bring all the lights closer, and the closer to the subject the light is, the softer it's going to be. So much so that you might not even need any diffusion or any softboxes to get a soft light. Now, I personally like a slightly harsher lighting than soft lighting. So this is kind of a nice in between where it is a little bit on the harsher end, but because it's so close to the subject, it does kind of soften out a little bit. So if you have a tighter space and you still want to get really great lighting, shoot on a lens like the 56 1.2 on a crop sensor body and bring all of those lights in, and you'll instantly start getting better photos. Tip number two is create some separation between the model and the backdrop. So in this example, I had my model set right next to the backdrop. And as you can see, there's some really harsh shadows, which kind of look a little bit more amateur, and they don't really have that professional look to them. So I simply asked her to take one step forward, and because of that really tight crop, you immediately lose the shadow and your image is instantly made a lot better without having to do literally anything other than ask your model to take a step forward. I didn't move any of the lights. I didn't do anything. I just utilized that crop and made sure that whatever I didn't want in the frame, which was that shadow that wasn't so pleasing, I made sure that was out of the frame. And a simple way to do that is by just having your model take one step forward. And by doing this, your photos are going to look way more professional, because a professional would never let ugly shadows like this slip into a photo. And by following this tip, you can easily clean up that frame and get those shadows out of the frame, which is going to make your photo look a lot better. Tip number three on how to take better looking portrait photos is utilize the focal length to your advantage. What I mean by this is something like a 56mm 1.2 with that 85 full frame equivalence is going to be a lot tighter. Because of that tighter crop, you can actually get a lot in frame without actually getting a lot in frame. Let me explain. For this example, I went ahead and set up a little curtain behind my model, and this curtain is really small. It's about 4 feet wide, but that was enough to still fill up the entire frame. And then I also put a little table in front of her and put a little candle just to add a little bit of a foreground element. put a little bit of a light splash on that curtain. Then we took a couple of portraits. And while I was doing this, I totally forgot to move my iPad, which controls all of my lights. But because of that tight frame, we didn't even see the iPad. We didn't see the edges of the curtain. We didn't see anything that I didn't want to see. And we still got a great photo because I was utilizing that crop of my lens. So by shooting with a tighter focal length, you can get away with building out really small sets and still getting that illusion of a bigger set because your frame is still full and your frame has texture and your frame has background and foreground element. And the viewer doesn't know that just outside of the frame, that's where the set ends. So tip number 3 is utilize your focal length to maximize the illusion of the set that you're shooting. And this is going to make your photos look a lot higher quality and higher production value than they actually are. Tip number 4 is create frames within your frame. My 56mm 1.2 on my crop sensor is really tight. And because of that, I can get really interesting frames by using foreground elements that I wouldn't be able to get if I was shooting on a wider frame. Here's a really good example. Our model brought this really cool umbrella with her and we were taking some portrait photos. And I noticed that the umbrella had some patterns on it that I could see through. So I utilized the really tight crop of this lens and I actually shot through the umbrella through little openings. And this created a really immersive, really cool looking frame within the frame. This is such a cool looking frame that I would not be able to achieve on a wider focal length. So when you're shooting on a tighter focal length like this, really think outside of the box and try to utilize your foreground elements or any other elements to create frames within the frame. And this is going to add a nice little twist to your portrait photos and give you some elements that you wouldn't be able to get with a wider focal length. So those are 4 tips that I like to implement whenever I'm taking portrait photos. And when I'm using a lens like the 56mm 1.2 that's a little bit tighter, these tips really shine and these tips really help me to create better photos without needing a big space. And if you guys don't have a big space and you want to take some really nice looking portraits, then make sure to follow these tips, implement them into your workflow, and let me know how they work out for you. Before I wrap up this video, I want to go ahead and say thank you to Viltrox for sending me this lens and allowing me to come on here and share my tips with you guys. If you guys want to check out more of my portrait photography, then go on my Instagram at MoodyDarkRoom and take a look at some of my other work and keep up with me there. And if you learned something from this video, go ahead and comment, like, and subscribe, as well as let me know if you guys have any tips for shooting on a focal length like this. The brand new Viltrox 56mm 1.2 Pro lens that I used for this video is also currently available and is out now as of September 1st, 2025. So you guys can go ahead and pick this up yourselves. Link will be in the description below. So if you guys shoot on a crop sensor camera and you want to take some photos like the photos I showed you guys in this video, definitely check out this lens. Link will be in the description below. But with all that being said, thank you guys for watching and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.